Hello, everyone. So, good evening and welcome to this other session no, for small animal surgery. Okay, so last time we talked about the bandages, no, the splints, and we also watched some videos no, on how to do these common bandages and splints, as well as the Emmer sling, the Velpo sling, etc. No? So, now let's take a look at the Spica splint. No, how is it made? And again, this is indicated for fractures that are above the elbow joint for the forelimb and above the stifle joint for the hind limb.
It can take a bit of practice to apply a spica bandage. Components of the video have been sped up for sake of time. Start with stirrups on the patient's paw and then apply the cast padding at the paw and work your way proximally. Once you reach the point of the elbow, go above it and as high into the axilla as possible with the bandage material before coming back down the limb. This technique will help to keep the bandage from slipping below the point of the elbow. It's important to apply a sufficient amount of cast padding to actually immobilize the elbow and the shoulder joint. Once the lower limb is sufficiently padded, move the bandage material up around the thorax. The second time around, we're going to bring the bandage material in front of the opposite or normal shoulder, then between the two front limbs. Follow the flow by pulling the bandage up above the near thorax again, and this time going forward between the two front legs and over the affected shoulder. This forms the basis of the crisscross or cross your heart type of bandage. So we're going to continue to add more padding and make sure we get the shoulder well padded to help immobilize it. Pull the bandage around the thorax again, and this time we're going to wrap around the elbow shoulder area before crisscrossing in front of the far shoulder. We're going to continue to add padding to that cross your heart bandage. This time, as I come forward between the front limbs, I'm going to wrap around that elbow again and cross over the shoulder just to help further immobilize it. Be sure to add enough cast padding to this bandage to create the effect that you want to immobilize the elbow and shoulder joint as much as possible, continuing with that crisscross and around the elbow, around the shoulder pattern that you're looking for. It's important to take the time to place the bandage material where you want it to fall, especially when applying such a large, difficult bandage. Once there is sufficient amount of cast padding on the limb, then the cling layer or the compressive layer is added. Always start at the toes, work your way up, use nice even compression, and I usually like to do at least one up, down, and then go back up before I go around the body with this bandage. Once I'm ready to start doing the body portion of this bandage, I'm going to use the same pattern as I did with the cast padding. I'm going to start by going directly around the thorax, and then my next turn will go in front of the opposite or far shoulder, normal shoulder. Back in this particular case, I'm going to go right around the elbow, back around the thorax, forward between the front limbs, back around the thorax again, applying a sufficient amount of cling or compressive layer until I have a certain amount of structure to my bandage. With the cling layer applied, I can now turn the stirrups over the cling so that they will stay up and keep the two middle toes visible. If a splinted bandage is desired, then the splints should be applied after the cling or compressive layer and before the vet wrap or protective layer. The final or protective layer is then applied. Once again, starting distally at the paw and working your way up and eventually around the thorax. Follow the same cross your heart pattern that was used with the first 2 layers, and be sure to really get that elbow and shoulder covered and appropriately restricted with your bandage. It is important not to apply this stretchy layer too tight over the chest as not to restrict breathing. Brands of this protective layer can be rather sticky, like this one, and it's important, very much important, not to allow it to get too tight when you apply it, so be cautious. Ensure that all the previous layers of the bandage material are well covered with your protective layer. Please watch the video on Jennifer White's bandaging technique to help you with getting the bandage along the paw started. She has a technique that works well to help keep those 2 middle toes exposed and keep the bandage a little bit more comfortable for the animal.
Okay. So now we have here another video, no, showing some common fractures in small animals.
Hi everyone, my very favorite fracture to talk about and to repair, the radius ulna fracture. Dr. Sylvester here, and thank you for joining me. This is a fracture which I call the urban fracture. We see it mostly in small dogs, and they're usually young, although not exclusively. We will see it in mature, 5-year-olds and so forth. It usually results from the dog jumping off the bed, off a chair, out of the owner's arms, hitting the ground, and just snapping its radius and ulna. The good news is, with surgical repair, these carry an excellent prognosis and a very low complication rate. So please, this is a fracture that you really want to encourage your clients to accept a referral to somebody who can actually surgically repair this type of fracture. So referral or repair is not an option. Well, absolutely you can splint these fractures. Let me tell you that the better prognosis is with the younger patient. So if this little dog that came in with the fractured radius ulna is less than 1.5 years, they will probably do well with the splint. If it's a more mature adult dog, try to encourage your clients to go for a surgical repair because prognosis is excellent, complication rate is low. With splinting in the more mature dog, complication rate goes up and failure rate goes up. Now that doesn't mean that it's a 90% failure rate. Be aware. That's all this is about. Just be aware so you know how to best discuss this with your clients. When splinting these fractures, you don't need to worry about getting a perfect alignment. This goes for any fracture that you splint. Just line up the bones so that they're straight. So put them in the splint and you're going to end up lining up the carpus with the elbow and the toes, and everybody's going to be pointing in the correct direction. It's okay if the bones override one another. It's not perfect, but it's okay. So don't waste a lot of time trying to get this great reduction. The rule when splinting any fracture is to immobilize the joint below and the joint above the fracture. However, in these little urban fractures, these small dogs that jumped off the bed and snapped their radius ulna, the fractures are in the distal third of the radius ulna. And we can get away with excluding the elbow from the splint and bandage in these little dogs. That makes a huge difference when it comes to bandage and splint issues. If you can exclude the elbow, you are going to prevent a lot of complications that are going to occur because of the bandage. So think decubital ulcers and skin irritation, and therefore client irritation. If you are uncertain on how to make
Okay, so those are basically fractures, no, or fractures are breaks in the bone. No? They are classified based on their characteristics, and that helps determine the appropriate type of treatment as well as the prognosis. So there are several categories, no, for diagnosing fractures. So for example, based on the skin integrity, we have classifications, closed and open fracture. So a closed fracture is basically the bone does not penetrate the skin, okay? Meaning there is no external wound. The soft tissue surrounding the bone may still be damaged, no? However, the skin remains intact. No? So these fractures compared to open fractures carry a lower risk of infection because the skin still acts as a barrier against pathogens. No? For open fractures, they're also known as compound fractures. The broken bone penetrates through the skin and there is an open wound that exposes the bone. So they have a higher risk of infection compared to closed fractures, okay, because not only the bone but also the soft tissues are susceptible to contamination. That's why for open fractures, you need to have prompt wound cleaning, administration of antibiotics, and also surgical debridement to prevent complications. Okay? So, for example, if a dog is hit by a car, no, and it sustained fractures where the bone protrudes through the skin, that is classified as an open fracture. Based on the extent of the break, okay, we have complete and incomplete fracture. For complete fracture, the bone is fully broken into two or more separate pieces. Bone continuity is entirely or fully disrupted. Okay, the fragments of the bones are no longer connected, and complete fractures are more common in adult animals because um, they are already mature. No, they have a mature bone, okay, and these bones have a rigid nature. Okay, so for example, a cat falls from a reasonable height and sustains a complete femoral fracture. Okay, meaning, okay, there are fragments of the femur, okay, that are no longer connected. For incomplete fracture, the bone is partially broken. Okay, there is some continuity, okay, some bones remaining intact. Okay, this type of fracture is often seen in young animals because their bones are more flexible. Okay, they are still growing, no, and their bones have a higher collagen content. So an example would be a green stick fracture. So a green stick fracture is the type of incomplete fracture wherein one side of the bone um, breaks while the other side bends. No? So named after the way a green twig breaks. No? So if you break, no, a green twig, there is only partial fracture, but still, no, the twigs, the segments of the twig, no, are still connected. So again, no, this is typically in immature animals whose bones are more pliable. Okay? So which do you think heal faster? No, incomplete or complete fracture? It would be the incomplete fracture, no, because there is less disruption in terms of the bone structure. For complete fractures, they require more intensive stabilization, such as surgery or casting, no, depending on the severity and location of the fracture. We also have a classification based on the alignment of the bone fragments. We have non-displaced fracture and displaced fracture. For displaced fracture, the bone fragments are misaligned and no longer maintain their normal anatomical position. Okay, the fracture ends may rotate, no, they may shift, okay, and that can impair proper bone healing. So for displaced fractures, you usually require surgery no, in order to realign and stabilize the bones, either by using pins, bone plates, or screws. Okay? So in horses, for example, with a displaced tibial fracture, you may require open reduction and internal fixation. For non-displaced fractures, the bone fragments remain in their normal anatomical alignment, okay, despite the break in the bone. No, there's no significant separation. There is no angulation of the fractured ends, and the treatment is often simpler compared to displaced fractures. So you can do for treatment. No, it typically involves casting or placing a splint. No, or basically immobilization without surgery. Okay, so for example, a dog with a non-displaced fracture of the radius can often be treated using a splint. So based on the two, no, you have a better prognosis for non-displaced fractures. The healing time is shorter because the bone fragments are already aligned. Compared to displaced fractures, you need to do realignment, okay, or what you call reduction and stabilization in order to ensure proper bone healing. Now, fractures are classified not only based on the relationship to the skin, the completeness, or the alignment, but also by the orientation and the number of fracture lines. Okay? So we have, for example, a transverse fracture, no, as shown also in the picture. The fracture line is perpendicular. Okay? So perpendicular at a right angle or 90 degrees to the bone's long axis. So the bone breaks cleanly into two separate pieces, no, and you have there a straight fracture line. Okay? So what are the common causes? It may be because of direct trauma, no, a blunt force that is applied at a right angle to the bone. No, a dog hit by a car, for example, can have a transverse fracture, or a horse kicked by another horse can also have a transverse fracture. No, so the fracture line is straight and horizontal, okay, across the bone. Okay, so um, this is often stable, no, as long as they are not displaced. But if displaced, then you need to do surgical fixation. So there are several options for this. No, either internal fixation with plates and screws, but for non-displaced fractures, you can do casting or splinting. Okay, so you also have oblique fracture. Okay, so for oblique fracture, the fracture line runs at an angle. No, it's at an angle to the long axis of the bone. Okay, so you can further classify it as a short oblique or a long oblique. No, so for if less than 45 degrees yung angle relative to the axis of the bone, then you have a short oblique. And if greater than 45 degrees, the angle, no, or the fracture is longer, more slanted, no, then you have a long oblique fracture. Okay, so it can also be due to a direct blow or indirect force applied at a certain angle. No, for example, if a dog gets caught, no, in a fence, and it twists its leg while it's trying to escape, then you may have a fracture line that is diagonal or oblique. Okay? So you have here the resulting bone fragments have sharper ends. Okay? Mas sharp siya, mas pointed yung ends, and there is also a high risk of displacement. No, it is less stable compared to a transverse fracture, and because of muscle contractions that tend to pull the bone fragments apart, no, you will have a displacement. Okay? So for this, typically it requires surgical fixation using plates, screws, or even intramedullary pins in order to maintain alignment. And then you have here a spiral fracture. Okay, so for a spiral fracture, the fracture line wraps around the bone's long axis. Now you have a head screw pattern. Okay, so helix or corkscrew pattern. And then the bone breaks in a twisting motion. Okay, so the fracture line encircles the bone. So this may be caused by rotational or twisting forces applied to the bone. No? So for example, if the limb is fixed or in place while the body rotates, no, for example, a dog's paw no, got caught in a hole while running, so it may cause its bone to twist and fracture. Okay? So the fracture line no, is long and spiral shape, and it's usually longer than an oblique fracture. Okay? So you also have here sharp bone ends no, which can damage the surrounding tissues. Okay? So similar to the oblique fracture, this is also often unstable because of the twisting nature of the fracture line. Okay? So you need to do surgery using intramedullary pins, plates, and screws. So similar to oblique. For comminuted fractures, now you have here the bone breaks into 3 or more fragments. So you have multiple fracture lines. No? So the fragments can range from um, yung single no fragment that is big to several pieces, fragmented pieces, no, like a shattered glass. Okay, so it's usually caused by a high energy trauma, no, like collision with a vehicle, no, fall from a height, or a severe kick, no, from a horse, for example. Okay, so you have here complex fracture patterns for comminuted fractures. Okay, and it is highly unstable. Okay, so you have multiple fragments. Healing is challenging because of reduced blood supply to the bone fragments. Okay, and it also requires, definitely requires surgery. Okay, so meron pa tayong avulsion fracture. No, avulsion fracture is a small bone fragment pulled away from the main bone. Eh, wala na tayong picture dito, no? But um, it may be caused by force exerted by a tendon or a ligament. No? So the fracture occurs at the point of attachment of the tendon or the ligament. So it may be caused by sudden muscle contractions, excessive tension on the tendon or ligament. No, very common in animals who are very active during running, jumping, or those who have sudden movements no, while performing. Okay, so the common locations for avulsion fractures would include the spine, no, it can also be in the knees, okay, or the pelvis, no, in dogs. So you also need to do for avulsion fractures, if the fragments are small, no, you can opt to do conservative management, so resting, no, anti-inflammatory drugs. But for larger fragments, no, it may require surgery. Okay, and then lastly, we have green stick fracture, no, which has been mentioned earlier. No, so one side of the bone is fractured while the opposite end remains intact. No, so the bone is bent rather than fully broken. So this is a stable fracture. No, so it heals rapidly. The prognosis is excellent, especially in young animals because their bones no, still have a high remodeling capacity. Now, for open fractures, or again, as mentioned earlier, known as compound fractures, they occur when the bone, the broken bone penetrates through the skin, resulting in an open wound. So we have here some grades for open fractures. So grade 1, basically low severity fracture. Though you have the bone fragment puncturing through the skin from the inside out, okay, during the fracture event. So the wound is small. No, it's usually less than 1 centimeter in diameter, there is minimal soft tissue damage, and there is limited contamination. Okay? So if meron mang bone fragments, no, there is only minimal bone fragmentation and the fracture is generally stable. As compared to a grade 2, you have a moderate severity fracture. So the wound is larger than 1 centimeter. There is moderate soft tissue damage and a higher risk of contamination. So in grade 2, the bone may be exposed and visible. For grade 3, that's a high severity fracture. So it's typically caused by high velocity forces like gunshot wounds, vehicular trauma, or severe crushing injuries. So the wound is large. So it's usually irregular. There is severe soft tissue damage and muscle disruption, and definitely a higher risk for contamination. Now we also have the Salter-Harris classification. Now this is quite a popular classification system. It's used for facial fractures, okay, or also known as growth plate fractures. Okay, so they occur in immature animals and they are classified using this Salter-Harris system. So this system categorizes fractures based on their relationship to the physis, no, or the growth plate, the metaphysis or the shaft of the bone, and the epiphysis, no, which is the end of the bone. Okay? So the physis, the metaphysis, the shaft of the bone, and then the epiphysis, the end of the bone. So for example, for type 1, okay, the fracture line runs entirely through the growth plate. Okay? It separates the epiphysis from the metaphysis. Okay? So it does not involve either the epiphysis or the metaphysis. So it just cuts, okay, entirely through the growth plate. So there is minimal swelling, okay, minimal pain, and it's only localized near the growth plate. So prognosis is good, no? So this can still recover fully, no? It will still allow normal growth of the animal, okay? For type 2 fractures, the fracture extends through the growth plate, okay, and then into the metaphysis. Okay, so you have here a triangular fragment. Okay, so this is known as the Thurston-Holland fragment. Okay, so still, no, for this type, the prognosis is still good. Okay, for type 3 fracture, you have the fracture extends through the growth plate. Okay, and then into the um epiphysis, no? It involves the you have here the epiphysis and then the joint, okay? Or the um what do you call this? The articular surface, no, the articular cartilage. Okay? So for this, the prognosis is already guarded, especially if there is damage to the joint cartilage, no, as it can cause a long-term arthritis, no, if they are not if this is not accurately aligned. For type 4 fracture, you have a fracture that extends vertically through the epiphysis, okay, and then growth plate, okay, and then also through the metaphysis. Okay, so this is very painful. No, there is severe swelling, and there may also be severely impaired function of the joints. So guarded to poor prognosis because a disruption of the growth plate and joint surface can lead to arrest of the growth of the animal or arthritis. For type 5, now, this is a crushing injury to the physis. Though it may not be visible initially, but okay, the injury is due to compression or crushing, no, which damages the growth plate. There is no visible fracture line. Okay, you may not be able to detect this immediately on radiography, but it leads to premature closure of the growth plate. Okay, so poor prognosis. okay, the animal will have an arrested growth, okay, which may result to shortening of the limbs or angular deformities. Okay? So we also have type 6, although wala tayong picture, okay, but it's a localized injury to part of the growth plate resulting in partial closure. Okay? So you also have an asymmetric bone growth and then angular limb deformities. Okay, so it's an addition to the original Salter-Harris classification. Okay, so originally it's only 5 classifications. Okay, so when describing a fracture, okay, you have a standardized format. No, so first, open or closed yung fracture. Second, complete or incomplete. Third, you have displaced or non-displaced. And then, what's the type of fracture? Is it transverse, oblique, spiral, comminuted, or green stick fracture? Okay? And if it's reducible or non-reducible, pag sinabi natin reducible, so you can still realign the bone fragments manually or surgically, or if the fracture is too complex to realign, then they are non-reducible. And then lastly, no, yung number 6 is the location. Okay, so identify the anatomical location of the fracture, if it's the diaphysis, the metaphysis, the physis, or the epiphysis. No, so for example, you have ano ba? So first, no, open or close. So open, and then complete or incomplete. So complete, for example, and then displaced or non-displaced. Displaced for the fracture type, severely comminuted. The reducibility, non-reducible fracture. And then the location, diaphysis of the femur. So ang haba. Open, complete, displaced, severely comminuted, non-reducible fracture of the diaphysis of the femur. Okay? So ang haba, but it helps it summarize all the essential information. You can easily communicate this for accurate diagnosis, planning of treatment, and determination of prognosis of the case. Okay? So now let's see how a bone heals. No? So what are the stages, okay, of bone healing?
Has your dog ever suffered from a fracture? Then you must have wondered how the bone actually heals. In this video, we'll discuss the 4 phases of fracture healing that will get your dog back on his paws. Phase 1. Inflammation. Inflammation occurs within hours of a fracture. Blood flows to the fracture site, which causes redness and heat. A blood clot, called a hematoma, develops around the fracture site. The purpose of this blood clot is to prevent further bleeding, similar to putting a band-aid on a wound. The initial inflammatory phase lasts for 3 to 4 days, and potentially longer, depending on the severity of fracture. Phase 2. Breaking down. In this phase, specialized bone cells called osteoblasts help build new bone, and osteoclasts break down and sweep away old bone. Phase 3. Repair. During this phase, a soft callus is mineralized by osteoblasts into a hard callus, called woven bone. Hard callus bridges the new bone to the fracture site and begins to undergo mineralization. Phase 4. Remodeling. In the final phase, woven bone is eventually remodeled and replaced with permanent bone. Bone repair complete. Fracture healing is completed during the remodeling stage, in which the healing bone is restored to its original shape, structure, and mechanical strength. The large callus is reduced to the size of actual bone, and the woven or primary bone is replaced with secondary lamellar bone. This process may take months or even a year or more. You can read more about bone remodeling on our blog by clicking on the link in the description.
Okay. So now let's go to fracture reduction. No? So fracture reduction is basically the process of restoring the broken bone fragments to their normal anatomical configuration. So this procedure ensures that the bone heals properly. No, its original structural integrity and function is restored. No, so the goal is realignment, no, of the fractured segments in order to promote healing of the bone. Okay, so you have here some key components. So restoration of fractured bone fragments. Okay, so they must be carefully repositioned to replicate their original alignment. Okay, so realignment of limb length, joint alignment, and spatial orientation. So limb length, ensuring that the affected limb is restored to its original length. Okay, to prevent, for example, abnormalities in the gait of the animal or uneven weight distribution. Okay, so joint alignment, okay, that's also very important for maintaining the proper range of motion of the animal and preventing arthritis. So, and spatial orientation, okay, so ensuring that the limb moves and functions naturally. So if that happens, no, if you ensure that there is normal limb movement, then there will be minimized stress on the surrounding muscles as well as the associated ligaments. And then overcoming muscle contraction and fragment overriding. Okay. So basically, okay, reduction techniques should counteract the pull of the muscles, okay, and realign the fragments, no, either manually, okay, or what we call the close reduction, or surgically, no, or the open reduction. So for closed reduction, this is a non-surgical procedure that is used to realign bone fragments without making an incision. So it mainly relies on external manipulation, okay, pressure to restore the bone to its normal anatomical position. No, it's commonly used for simple, non-displaced or minimally displaced fractures, and uh, it is performed under sedation or local anesthesia or even general anesthesia just to reduce pain and muscle spasms. Okay? So for this procedure, you need to properly prepare the patient. Okay? So position the animal in such a way that you can easily access the limb with the fracture. Okay? And then once the bone is realigned, no, you need to immobilize the limb using a cast, a splint, or even a brace just to maintain alignment during the healing process. You also need to monitor the patient after the casting, for example. Okay, so x-rays are taken to verify that the bone fragments are correctly aligned. Okay, and then monitor the patient for complications such as swelling, nerve injury, or redisplacement of the fracture. Okay, so we have here some advantages. So since there is no surgical incision, the surrounding muscles as well as the ligaments, blood vessels remains intact. No? So the soft tissues are preserved, okay, and this promotes faster healing. Close reduction, okay, of course, lower risk of infection compared to open surgical procedures. And then the procedure is relatively quick. Okay, so reducing the time that is required for anesthesia and the overall duration of treatment. Okay, so since no incision, not indicated there, no, but there will also be no scars. Okay, the overall cost of treatment is lower compared to surgical methods. But the disadvantage is that um, it can be challenging to achieve perfect alignment, especially because you only rely on external manipulation. Okay, so it's difficult or cannot be used at all for complex, comminuted, or severely displaced fractures, because if you don't align the fragments properly, okay, there will be improper healing, long-term complications like joint dysfunction. So again, no, the indication is for simple fractures with minimal displacement, okay, green stick fractures, okay, or comminuted non-reducible diaphyseal fractures, for example. Okay, so those are some of the indications. For open reduction, okay, you have surgical procedure to realign fractured bone fragments by exposing the fracture site. So the types, okay, here is limited open reduction. Okay, so the surgical incision is kept as small as possible in order to minimize the soft tissue trauma. Okay, or the open but do not touch reduction. So a larger surgical incision is made to expose the fracture site. Okay, so you have a better visualization. However, the fracture fragments are not directly manipulated, okay, in order to prevent the disruption of the blood supply, which can delay healing. Okay, so in the open but do not touch reduction, this is usually used with external fixators or bridging plates, okay, that span the length of the fracture. So advantages, of course, would be better visualization, direct placement of implants or internal fixation devices like bone plates, screws, wires, no, and they can be placed with precision, okay, which can improve the stability of the fracture. Okay, and then you can also use it will also allow the use of bone grafts. Now, bone grafts are applied directly to the fracture site to stimulate healing, especially in cases of bone loss. No? And um, aside from that, no, those disadvantages, you have the disadvantages. So increased surgical exposure can lead to more trauma. And again, no, the risk of infection of bacterial contamination is higher. Okay? So indications, articular fractures or fractures that involve the joint surfaces. Okay? Simple fractures that can be anatomically reconstructed. Okay? Transverse fractures, for example, can still be corrected with open reduction. No, this allows a straightforward realignment, no, because you can easily see the bone fragments. You can easily place internal fixation devices, okay, just to address the transverse fracture. Or comminuted non-reducible diaphyseal fractures. So fractures with multiple bone fragments that cannot be realigned through close reduction. Okay, because they are very complex. Now you have several bone fragments. Now, we also have here the word external coaptation. No? So it basically means the use of external devices like leg casts, splints, or bandages to immobilize the fractured bones, no, to promote healing. No? So we've seen some examples, no, sa ating last na lecture, okay, about this splints or bandages or casting. Okay? It's primarily indicated for stable fractures with minimal displacement in young animals because they have a higher tendency to for bone regeneration. Okay? And then after surgery, no, post-operative immobilization, okay, after open reduction, okay, also useful din ang external coaptation. And not only for bone but also for ligament and tendon injuries. Okay? So external coaptation can also be used. And not only in small animals but also in equine medicine, for wildlife, okay, etc. So we have some common casting materials, okay, like the plaster of Paris or POP. No, it's made from gypsum or calcium sulfate dihydrate that is when mixed with water, it undergoes a certain reaction causing it to harden into a solid structure. No? So you can easily shape this. it's malleable during application. Okay, it provides a good initial rigidity, but once it is set, no, it becomes brittle. So it's non-radiolucent, no, so it can obscure radiographic imaging. Ang limitation niya, no, is it's fragile, it's prone to cracking, especially when it becomes wet. Okay, and it causes high patient discomfort. It can reduce mobility of the animal, and if it's applied too thickly, no, during setting or hardening, it generates heat, okay, and it can cause thermal burns, no, on the skin. So now we have fiberglass bandages. No, this the second picture. It's a woven fiberglass fabric with a water activated resin. So it's lightweight, it's durable, okay, but still it is strong. No, so it maintains integrity even when it becomes wet. So it's relatively resistant to water. It sets quickly, okay, and it provides excellent immobilization. Okay, so it is less radiolucent, okay, but it can still partially obscure X-rays. So it still becomes difficult to monitor fracture healing. For polypropylene substrates, no, the third picture, it's a thermoplastic polymer known for its strength and flexibility. So it's also lightweight and durable. It's highly radiolucent, okay, meaning it allows X-rays to pass through with minimal interference. No, thus, mas enhance yung visibility of the fracture site. You can better monitor bone healing. Okay, so the disadvantage only of this is that it's less rigid compared to fiberglass. Okay, and it's more expensive, no, compared to fiberglass. So as I mentioned last time, no, so you can also practice bandaging, basic bandage and splint application. There are a lot of reliable YouTube videos on the internet. Okay? And you can also use stuffed toys to practice your casting. Okay? So casting is a very important skill technique.
Step 1.
No, so mahaba pa yung video. Okay, but we will not play that anymore, no, but just to give you an example, okay, you can search for this video online and yung title niya, no. So in summary, or to summarize, no, proper cast application, okay, would ensure a stabilized fracture, no, effectively stabilizing fracture, okay, while preventing complications. Okay, so for this, post-operative care is essential. No, I've highlighted its importance last meeting. With regular monitoring, with timely or scheduled changes in the cast materials to support healing and prevent complications. Okay, so I hope you tend to you have a time, no, to practice this in your pets or in stuffed animals. Okay, and that you'll be able to apply, no, yung practice nyo in the real world, no, when you encounter animals with fractures or with injuries. Okay, so that would be all for now. No, I hope you already accessed the reading assignment. If not, I hope you'll be able to read